All right, welcome back to D-Pod. We have another episode of BTS Behind the Staff, and today we have something different, something special. We have two guests on. We have Amy and Hyuna. Hi, Amy and Hyuna.
Hello.
Oh, wow, that was nice and surprised there.
Nice.
And
Not
then,
planned.
Yeah, and then we have Kata on as well.
Hello.
Yeah, so we want to do something different because Amy and Hyuna, they're peers, and they have some common experiences actually, and I thought it'd be cool to kind of hear their story of how they became CPIs, church plant interns, as well as how their friendship developed over the years. And so welcome on to BTS and D-Pod, guys. Why don't we start by having you guys introduce yourselves? Okay, so maybe we'll start with Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy. I graduated from college in 2018. A fun fact about me is actually I've been part of our church for a long time because I came in 2010 when I was a freshman in high school. And yeah, I've been here for over a decade.
Wow.
I studied molecular and cell biology and I minored in Japanese. And now I am doing something totally unrelated. Software QA engineer. Yes.
Nice. All right, and then Hyuna?
Hi, I'm Hyuna. I graduated college in 2018 as well from the best public school in the nation, UCLA. I know people hate on it, but anyway, I studied psychology and I'm doing my master's in business analytics at DePaul right now. Yeah.
Nice. All right. So I did want to start with kind of your guys' spiritual background, just for people who don't know kind of how you journeyed, your journey to Christ, basically, right? So maybe we can just start with like Hyuna, like what was your spiritual background? Like, did you grow up in church? Like, how did that start for you?
Yeah. So I grew up Buddhist actually because my parents are Buddhists and I just kind of adopted their religion and their beliefs. And I thought that it made sense because I don't know, it just seemed like a chill way to live, to be very zen and assume that all the problems that you face in the world, you can kind of control with your mind and not think about it or whatever. But I went to church here and there because my friends went to church and they would bring me to church. I grew up moving around a lot. So I lived in Nepal and the first time I went to church was actually in Nepal. I had a lot of Korean friends who brought me to Korean church and that's when I first stepped foot into a church. But I wasn't really interested or very open until I hit high school and I felt like I had everything I needed and I had everything that people said would make me happy, but I wasn't really happy. I had like good grades, a lot of friends. I was going to go to UCLA, best public school in the nation. And, I had a boyfriend and I had all the things that I needed, but I felt like it wasn't enough. And going into college, I think I went in really spiritually hungry because I think in my mind, I knew that this couldn't be it. I stumbled upon our church because of free Korean barbecue. I don't think I ever would have voluntarily gone if it wasn't for free food. But yeah, I think that's where I learned that the idea of the inconsolable longing that C.S. Lewis talks about, how if there is a desire in me that nothing in this world can satisfy, then that must mean that I was created for another world. And I think that really resonated with me. And I think that's when I really started thinking maybe there is something to Christianity and maybe there is something to believing in God and living that way. So yeah, that's how my spiritual journey started.
And so you started going to church regularly after that? Okay. All right. And then Amy, how about for you? What's your background like?
Well, my mom was Christian, so I did grow up going to church, but church was really, really boring. If you know at all how like Asian churches operate, it's like there's not enough kids. So either I'm babysitting someone or I get to go to the adult service and they're like singing these really old hymns with like maybe one person with guitar or piano. And then they give a really long lecture. And I'm always like, why am I here? But I think at least it did plant a seed in my heart, like at least to be open towards God and the gospel. And I think in middle school, I had a lot of questions about God, but because I was in China at that time and we didn't really go to church because, politics. So I tried to like learn the Bible on my own and I would do things like okay, God said like, oh, if you pray to him, then like your answers, like he'll answer your prayer. And I would be like, okay, well, dear God, if you exist, may there be lightning and thunder right now. And then nothing happens. And I'm like, well, okay, I guess God doesn't exist. So obviously, you can see I was really misguided. But when I moved back to America, my mom wanted me to go to an English speaking youth group to get back on par with my English. So then I found Grace Point and I started coming. And I was actually really surprised that they had mentors who can answer these questions I had. So I think that was the beginning of like my spiritual journey.
Okay, so then what was like a key moment for you guys then to actually make that decision? Both of you guys kind of grew up not going to church, you found yourself there. So how did you make the decision to actually follow Christ?
I think for me, so I did something that you guys probably heard of. It's something that our church offers. It's called Course 101. It goes through the foundations of Christianity. And I think that was super helpful for me because I had a bunch of questions like, oh, if God is real, why doesn't he show himself? And like, why did Jesus have to come and die for our sins? And all of that got answered through that material. And I think basically by the end of it, I believed everything and I wanted to follow God. But then there was like about half a year period where I was not willing to make that decision to actually follow God. And I think it came down to like me feeling kind of like sheepish. Like I feel like I knew that I was like a bad person growing up and like I didn't want to like taint the Christian name per se, because like I knew that if I were to become Christian and then I didn't do a good job following Christ, like everyone's going to point at me and be like, oh yeah, that's why I don't attend church. So
and how old were you when you were learning all this?
Freshman year in high school.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so 14 years old. But then that summer I went to a retreat, and I think there's a pastor at that time who gave his own story about how he went from a delinquent to now a pastor, and how he gave a quote about like sin has this power to take you further than you ever want to go, longer than you ever wanted to stay, and pay a price higher than you ever wanted to pay. And I realized just even then, right there and then, like my refusal to make that decision to accept Christ actually makes me remain in sin. And I don't want to end up in a place where like I regret where sin takes me, because that's what that pastor felt like. He felt like a lot of regret when he found himself in jail. So then I was like, well, there's really nothing holding me back. And so that's when I made that decision to follow Christ.
Wow. So that was all freshman year of high school?
Yeah.
When you made that decision? Okay, wow. Okay. And then Hyuna, how did that work out for you?
I think for me, in my freshman year of college, when I started going to church, I learned about the gospel, and there was a point where I felt like I couldn't move forward because I had a really hard time seeing myself as a sinner. I think I knew that I wasn't perfect, but I felt like I wasn't that bad. And during retreat, actually, winter retreat of my freshman year, my leader took a huge risk, and she said, why don't you try writing down all the sins that you've ever committed or even thought of, and like on a piece of paper. And I needed 2 pieces of paper front and back in very small writing.
Wow.
I mean, yeah.
I don't think I could remember all of it.
Wow, that's a lot.
And just that experience helped me realize like, wow, actually, I am pretty bad. I am pretty broken. And like, there's nothing I can do to undo the things that I've done. And there's probably nothing I could do to be better, because I think I've tried, but it hasn't worked, and I don't think it will work. And I think that realization, coupled with the fact that the knowledge of if I believe in Christ, then he says that he will wipe away all of my sins, and he will forgive me, and I'll be reconciled to God. I think when I came to that realization of my sin, it was like a no-brainer for me. Like, yeah, if Jesus offers me that forgiveness, then how can I not take it? So that's how I decided to follow Jesus and accept him as my Lord and Savior.
So that was also at a retreat. Was that your freshman year of college? Or
Freshman year of college.
Freshman year of college, okay. Wow, so yeah, both at retreats. So a quick plug here for our winter retreat coming up.
Come, guys.
In January. MLK, it can be a life-transforming experience.
It's true.
Actually, though.
Yeah.
And meet all your friends from the different colleges
Yeah.
around the
It's gonna be fun.
Midwest.
That's very
Minneapolis, University of Minnesota, and then and Purdue's going to join Chicagoland. So, but yeah, so you guys both made significant decisions. So for Amy in high school, for Hyuna, first year of college, and so let's just talk about college real quick. Like, just tell me like what was like a spiritual high point for you, and what was like a spiritual low point, maybe. Just what comes to mind when you think about like your college experience and trying to live out your faith on the campus. So Amy, you went to Berkeley, and then Hyuna at LA. So whoever wants to start first.
I can start with high points. I think my high points in college are definitely when I went to mission trips. So the first year after my freshman year of college, after I'd made my decision to become Christian, January of 2015, June of 2015, I went to Cambodia. I think DP mentioned it before in his podcast about going to Cambodia mission trip and how, our church has been doing that for many years with the same university in Cambodia. But I think that's when I first realized, like, wow, I could do this for the rest of my life. Like, I was really sweaty and so tired. And I realized later on that mission trip was a particularly intense one, because I think the leads at the time, who are Calvin and Esther, were just packed it in. But I think that was when I first was like, oh, wow, this is what I should be doing for the rest of my life. And so that's when I kind of caught on to like the whole idea of sharing the gospel and like doing it with other people, even though it's hard and everything's like that. And so I guess I think that is one of like the pivotal moments for me in college. And I think another high point was in my third year of college. Right after that third year, I went to Cambodia again. And I think that trip was a little bit different because I went into it feeling like, okay, I should know what I'm doing, or like there's some like freshmen that are coming on the trip. So I felt like I have to be older and different things like that. But then I think I just realized through that trip, like there are a lot of things that I was like, I kind of regretted doing or not doing, not sharing the gospel when I had that chance, for example. And I felt really like humbled by that experience. And then I think like I just learned that like, wow, the gospel that I'm sharing with other people is actually also for me. And I think that was like also another turning point moment, where before it was like, wow, this is so awesome. Like doing ministry is so awesome. And like, I want to do this for the rest of my life, to like feeling like, oh, doing ministry is awesome because I get to share this gospel that applies to me like every single day.
Yeah.
So,
You thought you were going to be awesome.
I know.
Yeah.
It's the gospel that's awesome.
Exactly.
So and I think that's an experience that a lot of us have. Like, like after a few years of, living out Christian life, you feel like, oh, I feel like I should have things together. And then you realize you don't. And then you have to hear the gospel again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes
And it just hits you in a fresh way. Yeah.
fresh way. Yeah. Yeah. And then Amy, what about for you? What is a high point for you?
Well, I was actually going to share about my low point first.
Okay, sure. Low points. Let's do that.
So I think end of sophomore year, it was a low point for me. I think, end of freshman year, so it's kind of interesting because, I was part of our church since like high school, and I picked Berkeley because it was like our church was there and we had a strong group there. So yeah, plus other reasons. So, but then I think I felt rebellious freshman year. So then I only hung out with like my floor mates, and it was like, it was like 2 girls and the rest were all guys, and we just like did everything together, and like we would watch movies like at night. And then, so I wasn't close to any of the church friends at all. But then at the end of freshman year, because like I was going to house with them, but then things got messed up, and then I didn't want to live with guys. So very last minute, I was like, anyone in church want to live together? So then by that, like it was a hodgepodge group of people. So then sophomore year, I think I just poured everything instead into academics. So, and like extracurriculars, because I was pre-med, I was very gung-ho about it. And I felt really burnt out by the end of that second year. And I was like, wow, I'm just putting a bunch of things on my resume. It's like really long and full, but I feel so empty and more empty than before. And I think like those first 2 years, because I didn't invest in church relationships and I just invested in myself, like I felt really tired, and I kind of lost the vision that I had like at the end of my like high school years. So that was a low point for me. And then I think the high point actually was probably in the middle of like junior year, I just was able to caught onto that vision again. I remember it was also a retreat. It was also winter retreat. Just being able to hear different testimonies and stories of other staff of like different low points they had and how they overcame that and how the word of God was true in their lives. And I think it just made me remember again, like everything that I experienced in high school. Cause I also actually went on a few mission trips too. Like I went twice to Cambodia and that really like softened my heart towards like ministry, towards God's calling. And all of that just came flooding back. And so I was also trying to be a student leader at that time. It's just like a term for that Berkeley people give to upperclassmen who like want to play a more active role in ministry and like actually reaching out to the younger students. So I think I was seemed at that time a really big decision, but now looking back, it's not that big. Was like, so, you know, I was being ambitious. I even picked up another part-time job right before the retreat. And then after the retreat, I was like, with this part-time job, I'm going to have no time to do anything for like any of the students. So I decided to quit, even though I like started for 1 week. And then I think following that, like senior year, we were also given an opportunity to actually pair up with our friends and just try to reach like a group of like freshmen together and love on them together. And I think that was actually a really big highlight for me, getting to experience the joy of like co-laboring with my friends in order to like share God's love with people.
And what would you guys do? Like you and your friends, what would you do to kind of love on these younger girls?
You know, I think it's really simple. I mean, in Berkeley, the culture was that everyone lived in apartments starting like second year and out.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And so like we just invited them over. We like cooked for them, play games with them. And then like in those downtime in between moments, try to like share a little bit deeply and see like what is going on in their lives and trying to like give advice to them. Or if they were not interested, like to kind of share our own stories and hopefully interest them a little bit. So yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. On the topic of friendships, maybe Hyuna, you can tell us a little bit about like your friendships in college, like how, like, because I remember when we were brainstorming for this podcast, you said that you might have some stories to share about your college friends, or like kind of what was like. What did you learn about friendship through that time? So take us through like some of what you're thinking about that.
Yeah. So in college, I think when I first started coming to church, there were a solid group of like maybe 10 girls that were coming, that were around, that were in the same class. And I think I got closer to some and not as close to others. But I think when I think about college friendships, I think about one friend in particular. Should I say her?
It's up to you.
Sophie.
Everyone knows Sophie.
Everyone knows Sophie. Hello. I don't know.
She's from Purdue. You'll see her.
She's
at
Purdue.
Retreat.
Yeah. And we were out here in Chicago together our first year out. But I think that friendship stands out because we really didn't like each other. My first year, I actually really didn't like her, and then she could sense that I really didn't like her and she really didn't like me. So I think that was like the beginning of freshman year. And I think one thing that kind of helped us reconcile that relationship was actually Sophie, who had become Christian like around Thanksgiving time of our freshman year. So like 2-3 months into college, she approached me first and just wanted to talk things out. And basically her like attitude or posture towards our friendship was that, hey, like I'm Christian, you're Christian, we're supposed to love each other. Like, let's try to do that. And I think after that, I was like, oh shoot, we should probably do that. And, love each other, obey God, love God. So I think that's when we started to be a lot more intentional about like keeping up with each other, texting each other, like having meals together. And I think that really helped, like that initial like common commitment and acknowledgement that like we are Christian, we are obeying God. And like, if that means trying to love someone that I really don't like you're just gonna have to do it. And I think because of that, like because of where we started, I think over the years, like I've known her for like 8 years now. I think the relationship has only gotten sweeter because every time we butt heads or like every time we have conflict, like we come back to that commitment that we have to God and to each other, and we're able to overcome it. And actually it becomes a lot sweeter than like other friendships that I can think of where we immediately clicked. But
you don't have to like work through conflict.
Yeah.
I mean, that must have really helped because you guys were CPIs together at at Northwestern,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in 2018, right after you graduated. So I'm sure it came into play because you guys lived together.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I guess to backtrack a little bit, CPI is basically like a program that our church offers where a lot of the new grads get the opportunity to be full-time ministers for 1 year right after college.
It stands for church plant intern.
Church plant
and
intern.
It's we don't offer it every
Every year?
year, but yeah, it has been offered in a number of years, and
Yes.
it was offered your guys' year.
Yes.
Yeah, you
it
guys were
was.
the lucky ones.
Yeah.
We're the awesome ones.
Oh my.
No, just kidding. It just happens every so often.
Yeah.
But anyway, we were very, very lucky. I was very, very fortunate to have been a CPI. But so from LA, it was me, Sophie, Jasmine, who serves at our Northwestern chapter at the Make New at Northwestern, as well as Fred, who's also at Northwestern. The four of us were CPIs from LA. And
Oh, I was just going to say the rest were from Berkeley.
the rest were
I
from
almost
Berkeley.
went, and then 2 weeks before I went, they said, "Never mind, you're going somewhere else."
Yeah.
Anyways,
but yeah, I think CPI year, that 1 year had like the most I had the most conflict with Sophie. We're living together. We were in a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom with Jasmine and Cynthia, who's also a Northwestern mentor, and we were in one room. So we shared 1 bedroom. We had 2 bunk beds, and we just butt heads a lot. There's so many little things that we fought about.
Yeah, all 4 of you are really different.
Very different, very strong personalities. Like, I remember fighting because I asked her one time as we were doing laundry.
Yeah, Sophie.
Yeah, Sophie, do you put your dish towels with your personal laundry? And she was like, no, I think that's really gross. And I felt really offended because that's what I do. So then I was so mad. And I was very cold. It's like little things. It's so dumb. But I was just...
I'm with Sophie on that one.
oh, okay.
Anyway, and you know, even though it's really dumb, because of all the different like conflicts we've had and like the different like history that we have, we had to like talk about it with our mentor at the time, who was Sheehan, who led the Northwestern Church. And yeah, like even though in the moment I just wanted to kind of like let it go because it felt petty. Like as I was talking with Sheehan, I realized I was actually really angry. And Sheehan was like, are you okay? You still sound really angry. And then I think after that was brought out, I think we were able to just like work it out and realize, okay, well, you know, like she's not trying to offend you. It's just, she's just saying it as a matter of fact. And, you know, you don't have to take everything so personally and different things like that. So then, yeah, that's like a snippet of what our relationship was like during that year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of coming back to college, like friendships in college, like what were some important aspects of kind of how you guys grew, right? Because we mentioned it earlier, but like a lot of times how people think about friendships is like, you know, it's people you click with or you naturally get along with, but the kind of description that you're describing of friendships, it almost seems kind of like slightly miserable. You know, it's like we're friends because Jesus says we are. You know, it's like, which actually I think is a beautiful thing. Like I think there's deepness in that. Like as you work through that, and I think that's why the gospel and the church has a unifying power that I think nothing else in this world has. So people who are so different and have different outlooks on life can genuinely be brothers and sisters in Christ together. So, but that's a process, obviously. So how did that? Like, what were some things that really helped with that in college? Maybe either of you guys.
Well, I think one thing for me was that I got close to some of my friends by like being like a student leader together. So then like when we stop focusing on just ourselves, but we have like someone else to focus on, and the focus is not like, oh, what's wrong with that person, but like, how can we love that person? I think that really united us both in like our desire to really want to work together for the best of interest of that person, but also like we learned to like pray together and to burden over a soul together. And like I think that grew us closer, because then like what was in the middle of our relationship was not so much about like our common interest or hobbies, but it was like the gospel. So I felt like that had a really big bonding effect.
Yeah. And for our context here in Chicago, like we don't have student leaders per se. Like that's not a position that we have, but I think the equivalent would be like just serving together, like the youth project that we just did this past quarter, right? I think all the people who kind of worked together on that, I think there was a sense of kinship and camaraderie that we felt, and kind of getting to know each other in a different context. And I think it's things like that that will help all of us kind of keep growing closer together. So I'm looking forward to doing another youth project. I'm actually meeting with Pastor Josiah next week.
Oh, nice.
It won't be next week by the time this podcast gets released, but yeah, we are planning to do that youth retreat. So
Yeah, great.
That's
Yeah.
exciting.
and then Hyuna.
I think for me too, it was definitely in learning how we grew in our relationship was through just wanting to love younger ones or wanting to love different people within our church. I think another way that our relationship grew is just by doing life together. And we were together almost all the time. We would have a big group text in college, and we would all say, oh, who's free for lunch, who's free for dinner, and we'd always just eat together. And then we would then go to a lounge and study together. There's a designated lounge that we loved going to because it had a game room right next door. So then we would play foosball like late into the night and study together. Finals we were together, and eventually when we moved out of dorms, we would live in apartments together and have people over, like the younger ones over, and different things like that. So I think over time, just being together and having that common experience bonded us together as well. And I think because of that togetherness, it was easier to be open with each other and honest with each other, which I think is crucial in just growing Christian relationships. Saying like, hey, I just want to confess that these are the sins that I've committed, or like, I just want to say sorry over these things, and just confessing and praying for each other and lifting each other's burdens up. Like, I think that was also key to growing in our relationship, but that aspect can't happen if we're not around each other, like we don't know what's going on in each other's lives. Or I feel like, like if I have something that's on my heart, that's a burden or that's a sin that I feel like I need to confess, but if I feel like I'm not really close to people, like that's not going to happen. So yeah, I think that's one way that we grew close.
Yeah. Because, sometimes we talk about like friendship takes work, it's like, and some of that work is just spending time together, right? And sometimes people wonder like, oh, how come I'm not getting closer to these people? But then you can like literally add up the number of hours you spend together, and it's not that much. And so it's like, well, yeah, it's going to be hard. And so that's definitely one of the ways. As you guys were talking, I was brought back to my college days, and one of the ways in which I grew closer to some of my fellow small group brothers was just by doing devotions together too. I just remember like, part of the togetherness was like, hey, we should do DTs, like we're Christians, like we should read the Bible. Like, oh man, like I have a hard time doing it on my own. Like, hey, let's meet up for it, And I remember, Mike Park, my peer who was in Boston, like we would meet on the top of this library. There's this little like terrace area, outdoor terrace, the beautiful California weather, and we would do DTs overlooking the campus, and we'd like read the passage and have no idea what it's talking about, and just bounce ideas off each other. Is this what this is saying? Is it? And then share like applications, and I just have like a lot of like fond memories of those times together, right? And maybe in the moment, like, it's not like we were becoming like super holy people like together like in that exact moment, but I think it's kind of the time, like over time, something was happening in our relationship as well as in our hearts through that. So, so I'm gonna now shift gears now. So we mentioned CPI, church plant interns. So it's a big commitment. It's like it's like your senior year, and a lot of people are thinking about first job, like how to get that first job, or grad school, whatever it is. But CPI, you're taking a year break, right? And you're going into quote unquote full-time ministries, right, to start planting a church together. So like it's like still wild to me that people do that actually, even though I know like we've had many classes of CPIs. How did you guys decide to do that? Like, can you tell me a little bit about like what motivated you, and how you made that decision?
I can go first. So I actually was, pre-med, so I wasn't planning on becoming a CPI, even though I was going to take a gap year, and it would have fit perfectly in my gap year, because I was like, oh, I need to like continue to build out my resume. But then I decided to apply. So there's an application process where you apply and you like fill out an application, answer some prompts, and then like your leaders will contact you later and like there's like a secondary application or something like that. And then, so I applied on a whim. Long story short, I had a really weird dream, and then somehow it like, should I talk about Aurora? Anyways, Aurora, she's another CPI who was with Hyuna when she first started in Chicagoland. But yeah, and then she was like, oh my gosh, Amy, you don't know what happened during DT, and like it's some random sort of things. But anyway, she was like, I think God is talking to me, and I think he's talking to you too, so you should become a CPI. And I was like, okay.
Wait, sorry, this is in the dream or
no? So I told
this is
her
in real life.
So I told her a dream, and in the dream I mentioned a passage, but then she did DT and she didn't finish, or she didn't bring her DT book, so she accidentally was like in Psalms. So she accidentally read the whole passage, which the second half was the exact same part as the different psalm in my dream. So then she was like, oh, and then the meaning and like everything, it's not coincidence. Anyways, it's kind of convoluted. I don't really even remember what passage it was, but you can ask her one day.
There was some coincidental things happening. Yeah.
So she was like, I think God is telling me to become a CPI, and he's telling you too. And I was like, okay, so I will fill out this application. Question number 1, why do you want to be a CPI? I don't know. I don't really want to. So then
Is that literally what you wrote?
Not literally,
Okay,
but kind of the essence of it. So then I obviously got a call from my leader.
Yeah, like
if you want this or not.
She's like,
I'm really confused.
yeah. She's like, you would never write this application for your med school application. I was like,
that's
ooh,
so true.
that is really true. So then she asked me like point blank, like, okay, do you want to or not? And I was like, because I think I felt hesitant. Yeah, I mean, like a big reason I think is finances, because like my mom, she's like a single mom, hasn't been able to work because of like a disability with her sickness and health, and so then I kind of was thinking about like wanting to provide for her like after I graduate, even if it's only for a little bit. So there's a lot of different things mixed in there, and then, but I think the turning point, long story short, was actually that winter we did a vision trip. So vision trip is like kind of like you go on a trip with like a bunch of people from church, and then you guys have a vision for like this new place that you're going to that doesn't currently have a church plant yet, and like trying to like maybe meet people, talk to them, kind of get a feel for that place and what the needs are like spiritually. So actually we went to Chicago, and we went to Northwestern and U Chicago. And at these very campuses, I was like, man, these are such elite schools, but they need the gospel here too. And I think that broke my heart. And then afterwards I came back and I was like, called my leader. I was like, I know that the application is closed already, but would you guys, if you need more help, I'll be willing to help out and become a CPI. And then she was like, so are you asking me or are you begging me? And I was like,
Oh my God.
I'm begging you. She's like, okay, refill out your application. So
because at that point you actually wanted it.
yeah, because I felt so burdened.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Oh, that's not what I was expecting. That's awesome. All right, Hyuna, what about you?
I think for me, it was actually the complete opposite, because ever since my freshman year, I wanted to be a CPI. I thought that like towards the end of my freshman year, I remember seeing a picture of all the 2015 CPIs that were going to Seattle. So actually like Stefan.
Yeah, Stefan was part of that
Noah.
group.
Noah, who planted here. And I remember hearing that one of my friend Gloria's, her older sister was also a CPI.
Yeah, Elena.
Elena is also a CPI. And I thought,
I was her leader her freshman year.
really?
Oh, wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I thought, wow, like that's really awesome. And I thought on the back of my mind, like, if I am Christian and like I want to continue to serve, that would be my next step after college. I think that's what I thought, because at the time I was like getting ready to go to Cambodia, and I was really gung ho about like, okay, I want to serve. I want to be like the best Christian I can be or whatever. So I think I remember seeing that. And like when CPI applications rolled around senior year, I happily applied. And but then I think the obstacle that came for me was when I realized that I would have to find like a part-time job during my CPI year, because I'm an international student. So visa laws say that I have to have an either part-time or full-time paid or unpaid job during the year after college if I want to stay in the US legally. So I was feeling really nervous about that because at that time I wasn't even sure where we would be planting, and I felt like it would be safer to stay in LA. And I was going back and forth, and there was a period where I wanted someone to just tell me what to do. But every person that I went to was like, it's up to you. Pray about it. And I was like, dang it. Just tell me what to do. But then one thing that was really crucial for me was one of the older ones in LA. Her name is Jackie. She told me, you know what, whether you stay in LA or whether you go as a CPI, you're going to grow. But just know that when you say yes to God, every time you say yes to God, you become a certain kind of person. And I think that really stuck with me. I was like, okay, then I will do it. Then I will say yes to God now because I know that there are going to be harder yeses as I get older. So I want those yeses to become easier. So yeah, that's when I decided, okay, I will be a CPI. And I went into training without a job, without any interviews actually. But miraculously, God provided me with a remote job through my friend Aurora, who also gave that dream.
The one that
had that dream.
Interesting.
But yeah, it was funny. Anyway, I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, we were in like a side room. Amy and I were in a side room, and at that time, Amy was still doing like her med school applications.
Oh yes.
And I was trying to apply to jobs. So then after like our 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. like training, we would try to like work on some things, you know. And I was telling Amy, I need to find a job where else I can go, and I was like crying. And then Aurora happens to walk into that room. She's like, you need a job? I can get you a job. And I was like, what? She was like working part-time for this nonprofit, and she knew that they would need more help. So then she referred me to that nonprofit, and that's how I got that job. That was fully remote.
Aurora seems to be the enabler of CPIs.
Wow. God uses anything and everything. So that's so awesome. Wow. Yeah, and I really like what you said about just saying yes, and when you say yes, you become a certain kind of person that and something inside of you gets formed. And so and that's definitely been my experience. I think I don't think I was the most spiritual person, or like even out of my peer class and things like that, but I think one of the things I committed to do early on in my Christian walk was to just say yes, whenever God invited me to do something. And I think that has been a huge blessing in my life. So, and I see how it has been in your guys's too. So so let's talk about CPI. All right, so you mentioned so can you just I don't know, tell us about what that's like. I've never been a CPI, so
that program didn't exist when we were in college.
So I mean, CPI life, it's maybe we can do it this way. Like, what did you expect, and then what was it actually like? Like, what were things that were unexpected about CPI life?
I think I expected CPI year to be a time where I can fully blossom my Christian awesomeness, like
a lot of rhyming. Blossom my Christian awesomeness.
But I just felt like, okay, this is the next big thing I'm doing for God, and I think I went into it having that naive arrogance, right? But I think actually CPI year was very humbling. First of all, our whole team was made up of CPIs. So a lot of times, at least in the past when they have done CPIs, they send out teams of people to church plant. And in that team, there's some older people, and there's bivocational people, and then a couple CPI sprinkled in there. But then this time for our Northwestern ministry, they somehow entrusted a dozen new grads who know nothing about ministry, and
basically Ray and Sheehan, a full-time couple. And how many? 12. So 12 of you guys, and you were the church. We were the came church to Evanston, and boom, there's a church right there.
Wow. Exactly. And I remember our first team meeting, and they were trying to figure out who's going to do food, who's going to do praise, who's going to do finances, inventory, and. Every time Ray asked for volunteers, oh, do you have any experience? Anybody I've done food? Crickets. No one has done food before.
I've never done it before.
And we all just graduated.
No.
Exactly. So then
I heard the question changed. Oh, was that CPIs?
Yeah, I think so.
It's not okay. Who's good at this? It became like who's the least bad.
Yeah.
That's sometimes how we talk about this.
Yeah.
I heard about that.
It was
The
basically
least worst.
The least worst.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might have not have been from Evanston, but that's a way that we sometimes decide who's gonna do something.
Yeah, so that was a lot. That was just very humbling. Like, wow, we really don't have any experience. I don't know what we're doing here. And I think that was very humbling, as well as just realizing that I didn't expect to learn so much more about myself. I think CPI, going into it, I felt like, oh, I'm going to go in and do ministry, and they're going to be people, they're going to be saved. And I thought very outward in terms of CPI year, and like producing or something like that, or performing, or yeah. But then I think I just realized, like, wow, I just learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the different ways in which I sin, the different ways in which I affect other people, but at the same time, like the grace that I received. So then that was really different for me.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't expect that.
What's an example of like something you learned about yourself from that first year? Like, maybe it's a little bit of a vulnerable question.
No. Okay, so I learned about the Enneagram that CPI year, and that explained a lot about me, because I'm a type 8, and that's like the challenger, and the challenger is like the like, you want to be strong, and like you don't want to be and it's because you don't want to be rejected. And I think that explained a lot of the relational conflict that I was having with people, because I think my friends felt like I wasn't being honest or vulnerable, and to them that felt like coldness, or to them that felt like lack of commitment in that relationship. But I was actually just protecting myself.
Like, I don't
you were
want to
scared.
look.
Yeah.
You were scared to
weak.
lose it or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't want to seem weak.
Yeah. So then I realized, oh, that's like the source of a lot of like my conflicts.
Yeah.
And then I was just able to learn that, like, oh, actually, like, me wanting to protect myself and be strong on the outside, actually that is not really very, very trusting of like God's love for me either. So then like different things like that, like understanding like, oh wow, like this part of my life, like the gospel has not penetrated. This part of my life, God's love hasn't touched yet. So that it was a lot of learning like that.
Yeah, which is humbling, because you went to serve, right? Like full time. I'm like, I'm giving up other opportunities in order to be this awesome like servant of Christ. But it's only because you were serving and other people around you were serving that I guess you guys got to kind of like learn those lessons about yourself. So
Yeah. Amy, how about you? Like, what were some unexpected things or things you learned through CPI year?
Well, I mean, I actually thought that I was going to go to Chicago and be on that team. And actually, originally, Hyuna was supposed to be like reinforcements for the
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh.
Oh, that's
For
right.
the 2017 church
Oh,
plants,
okay.
because
Yeah,
we just did a huge round of church planting on the East Coast then. And then like 2 weeks before, everything changed.
I remember that meeting. Like it was like right before we were leaving, and there was a doc of all the airplane flights, and who was leading our training at the time, said, okay, everyone, check that your names are right, and like if you're going to the East Coast, it should say BWI, and if you're going to Chicago, it should say MDW. And then me and Jasmine and Sophie looked, and we're like, wait, it says MDW.
Midway.
Yeah.
And then I was like, we were like, oh shit, I think it's wrong. And she's like, oh, no one told you guys? You're going to Chicago. I was like, no.
So the whole time you guys thought you were going to
We were
Pittsburgh.
going to Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and then mine was blank, and then they're like, "Oh, by the way, we need to talk to you right now." So then, I think it was Sheehan pulled me and like 2 other CPIs, and was like, "Oh yeah, I already talked to the other 2, so Amy, you're the last to find out, but we're going to send you instead to North Carolina."
Oh, wow.
So I was "Oh, okay." But I actually really appreciated my time in North Carolina because I really enjoyed the different layers of like older sister, because they're all like different ages. And then it was also interesting because the 2017 CPIs, all 3 of them stayed, the sisters. So then they were also there. So then they're like, oh yeah, like, don't worry, you're like the youngest. Don't don't be afraid. Just make a lot of mistakes. And like, and then they will tell us all the mistakes they made. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'll ever do that. Like accidentally buy 60 pounds of carrots and become rabbits for the next 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh, I remember this. Yeah.
Carrots for breakfast, carrots for lunch, carrots for dinner and dessert. And I was like, oh man.
Well, it's because
So
you guys had not done food before.
2017, so was that like Echo or?
No.
No. no. Well, 2017 Echo was a 2017 CPI.
Yeah.
Oh, but she wasn't in
at,
NC.
She was at Duke.
Oh, that's right. She was
Yeah.
at Duke. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So it was like Joanna. They're still there actually.
Yeah.
I don't need to know who it is.
Crystal. Okay.
Oh yeah, she already said the name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
So
That's funny. Yeah. So then, what was kind of like were there anything was there anything surprising about CPI life?
I think just realized one thing that I think that surprised me was that you actually have a lot of time if you work full time for church, and so like. And you can only do so many hours of outreach and ministry a week. So instead, what we did to fill that time was to actually do a lot of personal like building up and training in God's word. And like there's something that our church offers called OT Survey, which basically walks you through all the Old Testament books and like you read through them and then they kind of explain it. And that was really helpful. So I was actually really appreciative. Even now, I'm like, wow, that was like such glorious time of being able to just have uninterrupted time to like focus on that.
Yeah, because now you have a full-time job.
I know. Now I'm like, if I could like cook lunch and stuff, that's like pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just having that time to spend time in God's word and you know, I talk about like, I think when people imagine CPI, I think they think a lot about the competency. It's sort of the action oriented kind of things we do. But, you know, being a minister of the gospel, like it starts with our core, right? It starts with our personal relationship with God, right? And then we have the character to be able to live that out consistently, and we have to keep growing in that, and then we grow in ministry competency. So it's kind of this like a 3-layer kind of way that I think about people, and through the CPI year you get to grow in your core. So yeah, I think that's super awesome. So I want to talk about I think there's a lot to share about CPI, but I think just for the sake of time, I think let's talk about your guys' friendship and like kind of how that developed. So because you know, you guys did you guys know each other like before CPI year at all? Like,
No.
or when how did you guys first meet?
CPI training it was intensive training. Was it 2 or 3 weeks?
3 weeks.
Yeah, so
3 weeks.
if you sign up for CPI and you get accepted, you all came to Alameda, right? And you were there for like three weeks.
Yes.
And doing intensive all day training basically right before you guys got sent out. So so that's where you first met. Okay,
Yes.
what were your first impressions of each other?
I just always got her mixed up with Aurora. Who
That's
just
very
keeps
common.
coming
Aurora
up.
keeps coming up, yeah.
Are you listening?
interview Aurora.
But yeah, I was just, and then after a while, I just called them by each other's names. I think I just called Aurora Amy, just for fun.
Really?
Because she would be so offended.
Oh.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't remember first impressions.
First impression. I think this is a common first impression that everyone has of Hyuna, which is like she's very warm and like very smiley and like energetic. So it's like kind of easy to get to know her. And also Hyuna, her love language in terms of giving is like physical touch. And me and Aurora are both like we love physical touch, and we always are like linking arms and stuff. So then she just joined the linking arm group, and so like it was really easy to get to know her, you know, because she just is always there.
She just invited herself in.
Yeah.
Herself.
Yeah.
Wow, that's nice. It's different. It's just like sisters. I can't imagine. Anyways,
Linking arms.
So then how did you guys tell me about how your friendship grew? Because my understanding from what you guys have said so far is that Amy, you ended up in North Carolina, and then Hyuna, you were in Chicago. So like, yeah, so how did you guys maintain a relationship, or like what did that look like?
I think we didn't really maintain our relationship actually
Okay,
after our CPI year. I think here and there we would see each other during like peer gatherings when we have retreats and things like that. But I think one way that we reconnected was during COVID when actually Amy gave a testimony about how she grew in like knowing God's word better because she was very intentional about reading more of the Bible and things like that. And she shared about how like, oh, if I'm like I'm able to have more time and take care of my health better by exercising better, eating better, like why shouldn't I also get better at knowing God's word? So then I think I saw that testimony, and then I texted you. Did I text you?
I don't remember.
I think I texted you about it, and I was like, oh, I saw that you shared your testimony. Like, that's so cool. Like, I have a really hard time reading the Bible. right? And that's how we started
I
because and then
see.
Amy is very like she gets things done, which I don't. So that was really helpful because she was like, oh, well, then like we can have this tracker for reading the
I
Bible.
can totally imagine
And
Amy
I-
doing
yeah.
that. Like, let me step in and give you.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, great. And then she like made a Google sheet and we just basically every day, like we would try to, we had a goal, like either like capped by time or by the number of chapters we're reading. And then we would just log it on the
every day.
Every day. Yeah.
Yeah. No, actually, so I was surprised that worked because my friends are really terrible at filling that out. Like they'll do it for like 2 days.
Oh, so
and
you set it up for other people too?
well, like if any sort of tracker, like not just this, like in the
I see.
You
past.
tried that kind of thing in the past.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I
like
see.
that kind of method. Like they'll do it for 2 days and then they won't update for half a year.
Oh yeah, that's
And-
most people. Yeah.
And then I'm like, why am I the only person updating this? But then Hyuna was really faithful. Actually, we did this for
Oh.
months.
Yeah.
And every single day it's like updated. It's not like she updates it like at the end of the month or something. So then I felt really encouraged by that because like I was like, oh, someone else is also doing it. And like we don't necessarily need to text each other about it, but just like looking at the spreadsheet, you know. And then I think then that kind of morphed into like, oh, like we should just catch up like once a week and call each other. And then we just started having like really long, like hour-long calls or something.
Yeah.
And because it was COVID, so we had time. And then and then we started to actually get to know more about like different people that we're ministering to. And like it was really neat because like after I moved to Chicago like last year, I actually met some of these people that like I was praying for as we shared. So
Yeah.
And on the flip side, it was kind of neat because I would see your face on Hyuna's like FaceTime or Zoom or something like that, like during the workday. Because you guys are, you know, because Hyuna worked at my house during COVID. And then so she's like, this is my friend Amy. I'm like, oh, hi. And then later on, like you joined. So I was like, oh, I have stories about Amy already like, by the time you joined. So
Yep. I still
that's kinda-
remember.
yeah.
I have vague
When-
memories of that too. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I still remember when she told me she was dating. And
Oh my God.
At the time, I was not. I mean, I had no idea who it was because she didn't tell me.
Yeah.
But then when I found out when it was Ben Liu, I was like, what?
So I was surprised that you had no idea
I
this
had
whole
no
time.
idea.
Because like she has access to me, my schedule, because we talk to each other so regularly, as well as Ben's schedule because he's on her team and there's only so many members on her team. So like she never connected the dots
I
that
don't
like
try to.
when I was not available, he was not available. So she was like among the last people to find out.
Yeah,
and
it was
we're
like the day
genuinely
before.
shocked. Yeah.
The day before I found out because Nolan was there, and then I was like, "Where's Ben?" And then Nolan was like, "Oh, he's not here, but let's hope he brings back good news." And then I was like, "Wait, Amy told me that she might get engaged soon." Oh my gosh, it's Ben! And then the day after, I think it was like the day or two after. Anyway,
Yeah.
random.
Wow.
But
That's
then
funny. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a pretty cool way to like stay in touch. I mean, like of all things, it was COVID that kind of allows you guys to keep up or start kind of a friendship that way. So, I mean, I'm kind of shocked to hear that it worked too because Hyuna doesn't like filling out.
no,
That's why I'm surprised right now. I'm like, what? You did that every day? That's
I
amazing.
did. I should
Power
do
of
it
Amy.
again. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Rework the magic.
So so then what maybe like what's an attribute of the other person that kind of you think helped you guys, because you know like to make a friendship work, like you need both parties, right, to invest into that. So like what do you think about the other person kind of helped your guys' relationship progress? Yeah, even though it was, because I feel like that's not that common, like the long distance friendship happening. So like yeah, I'm just curious, like what helped in that?
I think one thing is like, I mean, besides the fact that she was actually really faithful in updating the spreadsheet, was that like I think in general Hyuna's like an open book. So like I think I get like people who are not like what you see is what you get. Like I have a hard time like reading them. And so like I really don't know what to do sometimes. Like I don't know like if they say this, if they actually mean something else. But like I think Hyuna, she's just very transparent and genuine. And like and then oftentimes like she'll be really upfront and honest like what she's going through. And she's like, oh, I'm having a hard time with this. And then she'll start talking about it. And then I feel like because of that, she lets me see like a window into her life, and then we can actually connect on a deeper level rather than staying superficial. Like versus like if you ask someone like, oh, how was your day? It's like, oh, everything's great. but like Hyuna would actually tell you all the details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think something that helped me was just like the fact that she would ask questions like that. Because I think like even though I guess when I'm prompted, I can say those things, but then like I'm not someone who's I'm someone who's kind of content staying superficial. Actually,
So you won't naturally move to that.
I won't
conversation.
naturally move to that, but then I think because Amy would ask me and she would remember different things about like what we talked about and things like that, I think that really helped me like open up. And I think, yeah, as I just opened up, she did too. And it just felt like, oh, we could like trust one another. And yeah, I think also another thing about Amy is just how she can get things started. Like, oh, if I say like, oh, I feel like I should read more, or like, oh, I feel like we should like catch up more, or like pray together more, then she makes it happen. Versus I wouldn't. like
you're kind of airing it out. But then
yeah.
Amy like latches onto
Yeah,
it, like,
yeah,
all right,
yeah.
well, let's do it.
And
Like,
it
and she
works.
just goes, she like brings it into the world.
Yeah. So then I think that was really helpful too.
Yeah, that's really neat. So then what what would be an advice that you guys would give to, like I think our college students in our ministry, and just even those of us who've graduated, we have different friendships we're trying to maintain, build. Like, what's a piece of advice that you might give to maybe especially our college students who are kind of trying to learn what does it look like to have Christian friendships? Like, how do I build and maintain healthy friendships as a follower of Jesus? Like, what advice would you give with regards to that?
Well, I mean, I think for one thing, like trust. I think trust is really important in any sort of relationship. And I think growing up with my background, I just have a fundamental distrust towards people. But I think one thing you can rest assured is like, at least those who are in Christ, that like we can trust one another because like, well, one thing is like we have one thing in common is like we're sinners and we were saved by the blood of Jesus. And like, therefore our bond together isn't created by something superficial based off of like how well we click personality wise, or like where we live, or even just hobbies or classes that we take. But it can actually be based on something more deeper. And you also know that as a Christian, the other person probably shares similar values with you. Like probably like, don't want to lie, don't want to like gossip, like, things like that. So then there's that, you can trust more. And I think with that trust, I think if you're willing to be able to be open and honest about like what you're going through, being a little bit more vulnerable to even talk about like mental health stuff, family stuff that can get complicated, I think that will actually do different things for you in your friendship. Like, first thing is like, it signals to your friend that you trust them enough. Like, you have that trust, and that can cause them to trust you back. And then number two is like, it helps them create like a fuller picture of who you are, and also have more empathy for you and feel more burdened for you. And then hopefully as that exchange goes on, then like you actually grow deeper, knowing that like you're actually fully known and yet fully loved. Because I think like sometimes like people feel ashamed of like different things that they're going through or struggling, like, and they keep that hidden so that maybe that they would be more accepted by others. But actually it's the opposite. Like, when you reveal that and other people actually feel for you more, then like that's how you get closer.
Yeah, it's really counterintuitive, but yeah, I've seen that work out.
I think I would say to lean into conflict or like differences that you see that might be hard to deal with. I think, I don't know, like nowadays there's this language of like, oh, this person is toxic. Like, this relationship is not good for you because of X, Y, and Z reasons. And I guess if there's like abuse involved or something like extreme like that, then
there's
it's
genuinely
valid. Yeah.
toxic relationships, but it's sort of, the definition's gotten expanded to where it's like, if you don't even agree with something,
or
then
like
it's toxic,
you just make me feel bad.
Yeah. But I think I would say like, if you are both Christian, then you should lean into conflict, and you should like try to work things out and reconcile and show love to one another, because as you do so, like it's like an opportunity to like either learn more about yourself and experience more of God's grace because you're humbled by your sinfulness, which contributes to the conflict, or it's just an opportunity to extend grace, to show grace to another person. And I think it's through working out those conflicts that you can I don't know, like that you can affirm your commitment to each other, and like having that commitment is actually something that's like kind of like what DP mentioned, like really beautiful, because it's unlike anything else in this world. And I think that love that you have for one another, like Jesus said, is going to be what shows to other people too that you're disciples of Christ. So yeah, I think that's something that I would encourage people to do. Like, even if it feels like we're so different, like me and like my friend are so different, or like she's so X, Y, and Z, whatever. Like, if as you work towards like reconciling and like loving each other and committing to each other, like I think you're much like richer for it.
Yeah, and like people sometimes feel like if there's conflict or like kind of negative energy in a relationship that like something's wrong, but actually it's consistent with our theology, right? Because if we're sinners, like we're gonna rub up against each other the wrong way sometimes, and it's the fact that we have the gospel which allows us to forgive one another, right? And love then covers over a multitude of sins, and despite the fact that we have differences, we experience this depth of relationship. And then it's the verse that you cited, right? That love for each other, like that shows people that we follow Christ. So yeah, thank you guys for sharing that. Here's my last question, okay, before we wrap up. Okay, so we've seen, you guys have gotten to see kind of Chicago church over the past 4 years. So I guess for Hyuna, you've been here. So you were in Evanston the first year, and then you moved to the Hyde Park Church in the second year. And then Amy, you weren't here from the beginning of the church, but you were out here for Vision Trip, in 2017, and kind of and burdening for the campus. Like, let's just end by kind of, what are you grateful for? As you think about how God has led the Chicago church thus far, like, what do you want to give thanks to God for? Yeah, why don't you just share your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm definitely grateful for the fact that we have a church out here, and because I came during winter time in Chicago, and that's like literally the saddest time of the year.
Sad.
And I think like the fact that, I mean, we're a small group because, Chicago is not that big of a school to begin with. But the fact that we get to be like that light on this hill, the city, and like being able to be a source of like, I don't know, like a different kind of presence than this world. And I think it's especially strong at U Chicago, having now been here and knowing like how students are like depressed or like they're super ambitious and worried and anxious all the time. I'm just glad that there is someone here. And I think I'm really thankful too for all the amount of labor that different people have put in. I know it's kind of a little bit of a revolving door for like the mentors, but I think just even being able to see like the new grads currently and know that, wow, like my friend Kaylee, who currently is at the Minnesota church, like reached out to her when she was like a CPI here, and now she's not only saved, but she's also like a member at her church, and she wants to like reach out to other people too. So I was just like, wow, it's just amazing, because like you just never know, like in the span of 4 years, how much you can transform a life, and there's actually like a rippling effect. And so that's only the beginning of like this person's impact on other people's life. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful to just see how God uses broken people and meager efforts to grow a church and to save people's souls. I think about like our first year here. Not sure about how the 2015 bros felt, but I think at least for our team, I felt like that CPI year is colored with just a lot of like learning about myself and being humbled, and like to know that about like the first year of our church, how we were just full of people who didn't know what we were doing, and yet to see our church now where there have been people whose lives and eternities have been altered. I think I'm just grateful that I get to see that full picture. And I think it just gives me hope again that like, wow, like it doesn't matter my competence or my experience, but if I'm willing to serve God and have that just surrenderedness, then God could really change lives. God could really change eternities. And I think, yeah, I'm grateful for that lesson, because I think it's not just something that stays within like like as we look back on the past, but it's something that I can hold on to because God doesn't change, you know, like he's faithful and he can work through people. So as I look into the future of our church, the future of maybe more church plans or different things like that, or even just the people, individual people that I see, I think I have a lot more hope.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. And I'm personally thankful too, because I think, you know, you guys are talking a lot about like what happened in the church, but you know, for me, as I hear your story, I see what happened, like what God's done in your life, right? As you took those steps of faith. And, you know, I think when we're living Christian life day to day, it just feels so mundane and kind of like, oh, just kind of barely getting through it. But it's when we look back, you know, we see actually, yeah, like you were saying, you know, like God has been faithful and he's not only done something like around and through me, but he's done something in me. And I've learned to trust in God. I've learned that God is real. And I've learned that indeed God is our great reward. And I think that alone, right, it's worth the price of admission, if I can use that phrase. So, yeah. All right. Well, I think that's it for today. Thank you guys for being our first. Besides Kat, I mean, we did an AMA episode earlier, and so Kat is the first, I guess, sister on. But then you guys, besides my wife, you guys are the first sister guests that we've had on the podcast. So thank you for that too. Nice. So it's exciting. So here we go. Outro music. Well, thanks everyone for joining 4D Pod. Yeah, if you have suggestions or comments or questions, submit it to the AMA link as usual. Okay, that's in the show notes. That's it for today. Bye-bye.